tonight. I'm Catherine. I'm the instructor at Watchung Booksellers. We're so happy you're here tonight. And we're so happy that Jason brought his friend Amy Larocca here to talk about her new book, How to Be Well. It is fantastic. So you should definitely pick up a copy on your way out. Amy will be signing after. And we're going to do about a half an hour conversation, 15 or 20 minutes of Q&A, and then signing and discuss. And I'll just leave them to it in a second. I'm going to read their biographies really quickly. I'm going to go. Amy Larocca is an award-winning American journalist. She spent 20 years working at New York Magazine as both fashion director and editor-at-large. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Vogue, Town & Country, and the London Review of Books, among other publications. She lives with her family in New York and North London. Jason Tanz is currently a writer at Salesforce and formerly the editor-in-chief at Lyft. Before that, he worked at Wired for many years. He is the author of Other People's Property, A Shadow History of Hip-Hop in White America. He and his family live in Montclair.
Okay. Why don't you take this one?
Okay. I think the most crucial thing that was left off of both our bios, of course, was that in the mid-90s, Jason and I were co-editors of the College Hill Independent.
That's right.
The Brown Risby weekly alternative newspaper.
Yeah.
We were way too cool for the Brown Daily Herald.
Yes, so here we go. Anything 30 years in the making? 40 years in the making? Well, anyway, thank you for all for coming out tonight. I'm very excited to talk about wellness, and I think it's a particularly auspicious time to talk about it, since today we all learned about the dangers of ketamine use. So,
yeah, that was one of the things I freaked out and refused to do for the book, even though I did visit a ketamine clinic.
and that was even before you saw it.
What came out of it.
Yeah, what came out of it, exactly. So I want to start by just asking, what are we talking about when we talk about wellness? It incorporates, in this book you cover so much: fitness and psychology and spirituality and alternative medicine and the, optimized technology. And so what, as you were thinking about, where did you draw the lines? What was your operational definition of wellness?
Well, that was one of the hardest parts about writing this book, and part of why it took me so long to write it. And I was mostly a fashion editor, and I wrote about the fashion industry for most of my time at New York Magazine. And I got interested in writing about wellness because I started noticing that it was being talked about and written about and sold using a lot of the same methods and techniques that fashion had been using, and it was a lot of the same language. And I come to realize that one of the kind of seminal moments was Amanda Champal Bacon, the celebrity juicer and founder of Moon Juice, gave an interview in Elle magazine in which she described what she was eating, just one morning, and it was so crazy. It was like she was eating ground up pearl dust and all this stuff, and it was happening while fashion was becoming much more democratic. So shows were being streamed live, and clothes were available online to anyone who wanted them. So this thing that had been very inaccessible and exclusive and aspirational, which was fashion, had become very, well, not very, because it was still very expensive, but much more democratic than it had ever been historically. And then suddenly here was this person who was having ground up pearls for breakfast and this other stuff that I can't even pronounce now after writing this book. And it was wellness is coming to replace fashion. And I kind of understand, more than I understand clothes, I understand the power of longing and the power of want and the power of selling. And that was much more what I covered than the actual clothing. And so that was sort of how I got my point of entry into wellness. And I came to understand that what was happening was that women were being kind of told that what you had to do was buy your own body back from people who were going to sell it to you. And that was how I came to understand the wellness industry.
We buy our own body back from the people who are going to sell it. So they're selling you your right to buy your own body, is that right?
Pretty much. The idea was you don't understand, and we do. And your body's a mystery, and just a riddle to be solved. Mm-hmm. And there's these very esoteric and very expensive answers.
the answer is, this was at the beginning of your book, you quote this routine that I'm just going to read very quickly to give you, maybe this isn't surprising to many of you, but it was to me. I usually wake up at 6:30 a.m. and start with some Kundalini meditation and a 23-minute breath set, along with a copper cup of silver needle and calendula tea before my son Rohan wakes. At 8 a.m., I have a warm morning chi drink? Is that what it is?
Sure.
On my way to the school drop-off, drunk in the car. It contains more than 25 grams of plant protein thanks to vanilla mushroom protein and stone ground almond butter, and also has the super endocrine brain immunity and libido boosting powers of brain dust, cordyceps, reishi, maca, and shilajit resin. I'm sure that's not pronounced correctly. I throw Hoshu Wu and Pearl in as part of my beauty regime, and I chase it with 3 Quinton shots for mineralization and 2 lipospheric vitamin B complex packets for energy. Only 2? That was my question. No, so.
Yeah, and it's like, you thought you were fancy because you got a Prada bag.
Right. So it's even more esoteric and expensive, presumably.
And just like, you have to know.
Yeah, so that's something that you talk about a lot in this book, is this idea of secret knowledge.
Yeah.
Which has a long history as a kind of motivator in this country, and especially now, this idea that you're being lied to, and that you need to, do your own research.
And I think, like, and especially in these very divided times, it's a very unifying factor, right? What do we come together on? The fact that we're being lied to. It brings the left and the right together.
Yeah, right.
Adaptogens, the only thing the left and the right know.
So, a lot of these movements have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Maybe, and so what is different, and maybe you've sort of gotten at this, but what is different about this moment in particular?
Well, alarmingly little if you look at like 1930s Germany, for example. This was, someone asked me once, like, what do you think about from all of this? And I was like, 1930s Germany, mostly. Because I was really interested in looking at moments, so like none of this wellness stuff is new, and I was really interested in looking at moments historically when interest in health and purity has surged historically. And a lot of these ideas really were surging in Germany around the time of the Industrial Revolution. And there's actually been a rekindling of interest in a lot of the spas in Austria and Germany that came up during that time, and a lot of the larger hotel conglomerates have been revitalizing some of these spas, and they've become very, very, very popular again, and you see them on Instagram. The this and that method, and these big sort of scary places like very Thomas Mann and very Magic Mountain. And so what you had happening then was people moving away from a sort of rural farming lifestyle and moving to the city. And that frightening people and saying like, oh, but what about our way of life? What about our families? And is this safe? Is this healthy? Is this polluting us? You have people coming from far away, and how do we feel about that? How do we feel about immigrants, and how do we feel about migrants, and how do we feel about this corrupting our way of life? And you had the Volkisch movement, and you had what was called the Lebensreformers, and you had things like nudity, and you had things like, that dense little bread that you can still get like at the bodegas, and you had things like Sinalco, which was a sin alcohol, like basically, from what I can gather from the descriptions, was like Tang, but it was like a non-alcoholic drink. So you had a lot of, you had Rudolf Steiner, you had a lot of things that you still have around today that were basically a rejection of modernity and a craving for purity. And when you look at, what happened to the people who were pushing this, and you realize that some of them came to America and started a movement that became known as the Nature Boys, and they started a lot of health food stores in California. And then some of them stayed in Germany and they became Nazis and really concerned with the purity of German race. Should we talk about when technology happened in America and people became very frightened about the way that American culture was changing, and it was very frightening to a lot of people. So those parallels and fear of purity and what it meant for, and the surge in the wellness movement and ideas about purity and ideas about our health, and what that means for our society.
So yeah, the idea of society as corrupt somehow.
And dirty.
And dirty, right.
Fears of outsiders.
Mm-hmm. And so you see a parallel between Germany in the 1930s, the industrialization of Germany, and the technological boom. Is that like social media?
Yeah,
and...
social media and and what's happening in immigration and outsiders.
Right.
Fear of outsiders.
Right. That's an interesting link. So now this is a $5.6 trillion industry.
I mean, yesterday it was. Today it's probably like, it's just so big, it's sort of hard to keep a handle on it. And the amount of industries, like there's like a wellness checking account, like the amount of things that just keep getting pulled into the wellness umbrella. And the power of wellness as a marketing term seems kind of bottomless.
Yeah, so talk to me about the commercialization of it, because, again, as you said, a lot of these ideas have been around for a long time. I think about the est movement, sort of a wellness movement in its way. But at some point it became an industry. When did that happen?
Well, I think there's so many different ways into it, right? So there's beauty industry, which now is almost entirely rebranded as wellness. Mm-hmm. So there's the whole beauty industry aspect, which basically just calls itself the wellness industry now, but is just the beauty industry. Then there's the kind of overlap of medicine and which aspects of American medicine are now called wellness.
So talk about that, because, my assumption is it's not, I think wellness tends to mean alternative medicine.
Well, that's complicated because, so you have, wellness and medicine can mean various things. It can mean medicine for rich people, when you get words like boutique and concierge to do with actual medical treatment. It can also mean, and there was a woman I interviewed for the book who wrote a really interesting book herself about the history of women in healthcare in the United States, really drawing a lot of attention to the disparities in treatment for women, diseases and conditions that disproportionately affect women, but I think you can also look at affect any number of minorities and see that their, research has been really underfunded, treatments are really lagging behind, and say it's really a misnomer to say alternatives because they're just seeking treatment.
Right.
And so the idea that it's alternative medicine is not quite fair, because there's, for something like, say, autoimmune conditions, there isn't really a mainstream option. So to say that it's alternative medicine isn't quite accurate, because there isn't really...
There isn't any for it to be alternative to.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's not really a mainstream option. So you have wellness medicine that can be like going to a concierge or a boutique practitioner who's done up their office to look like a kind of, like Kate Hudson movie set. And you can also like get kind of spa treatments there while you're like maybe also getting your checkup. And that's one version of wellness. Or you can also have it be kind of explicitly political, which is much more about like the roots of what is self-care and wellness. So it can mean so many things that it almost doesn't mean anything anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Which is part of the problem.
I mean, you actually have a really interesting definition at the end. I think you kind of conclude with someone coming up with a definition that you really like. Let me see if I can find it really quickly here. Did I write? No, I might not have had pen.
Is that professor told me it's like how quickly you can return to stasis?
It was the one who was like, it's nothing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm not gonna be able to find it. So there's a lot about this kind of dichotomy between empowerment and victimization.
Yeah.
Like and maybe you can talk about that dynamic a little bit, because you were talking about just now, people finding solutions to real problems that don't have solutions otherwise, and
Yeah.
taking their health in their own hands, and that, as you were saying, it gets sold back to them, and to some degree, it sounds like there's manipulation of that impulse as well.
Yeah, and when I was like thinking about writing this book, and when I went out to sell this book, a lot of people were like, a lot of different publishers were like, well, I don't understand. Are you pro or anti wellness? And I was like, we are so far too late for that. Like, we're just in it. Like, you can't, like, I'm doing my wellness and I'm mad at it, and it's too late. Like, we all are just in it. We're so, like, it's just so much a part of all of our lives that it's impossible to sort of extract whether or not you're for it or against it, or, it's just such an aspect of the kind of American experience. Mostly this book is about women, and it's such an aspect of the American female experience, I think, to just, you're living wellness because you're being marketed it so much, and you can't really escape it.
Right, it's just the fabric of.
It's just kind of the fabric of the female experience.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, you opened this book by getting a colonic.
Yeah.
Let's. So, talk about, like, I guess my question is, did you do that for the book, or like you did?
Yeah, I did that for the book.
So,
it's not recreational.
So talk. I mean, they're very popular. So talk about the, your experience with, experimentation with wellness techniques. Was there, like, what was your regimen like pre-book?
So I think pre-book, I was probably like pretty far in. And I would say, like, until I had children, it was probably all vanity. Like, pretty much all vanity.
Sure.
And then once I had kids, and once I had an unwell child, I was like freaked out. And aware of like how dangerous things can be, aware of how, because one of the things for me about having a sick child was that my child was sick in a way that was described as a lightning strike. So it wasn't genetic, and it wasn't, it was one of those things that was like, there's no explanation. So you go looking for explanations. And of course, the world loves to provide explanations in the form of blame, and especially blame to the mother, and blame in the form of like, you have not been pure. And so you can kind of spiral, and there's so much about, these ideas of what you've done wrong, what you might have done wrong. And so I think I got much more interested in these ideas about like what the wellness world is telling women. I got really interested in it around ideas about breastfeeding, ideas around like women in purity and about what you're supposed to do. Because in the absence of an explanation, you want to find one. And the world is so eager to supply them, and eager to supply them in the like, you did something bad. So that got me much more interested in the kind of depths of it beyond just vanity. And I think that's common for women, that wellness is a kind of vanity exercise, but then your vulnerabilities, once you have children and once you're responsible for something outside of yourself, just it becomes a much bigger and deeper idea. Or it was for me. I mean, but I suspect that that's not uncommon.
Yeah. So, and that's when you invested in wellness in a different way.
I
Or
don't
you
know
just
if
had
I
to-
invested in it as much as it sort of occurred to me, or I heard those things differently.
You were just more aware of
I was just
that
kind of more
stuff.
conscious of it.
Oh, I see,
yeah.
I see.
And I think like things that sort of sounded like noise to me before that, like I think I sort of started thinking about it like with the conversations around like breastfeeding or
Right.
around like how harsh the judgments were
Yeah.
for women about like the choices that you made.
Even like, we had our first child in San Francisco, and the fact that we had him in a hospital was
Yeah.
a scandal.
Yeah. Yeah, like I would feel like a kind of murderous rage about people who would like talk about, you know, like the oppression of a hospital birth. And I was
Right.
like, you have to have your child in the hospital.
Yeah.
You know, and I just would feel like this kind of like, you know, I just sort of started noticing the ways that people would talk about these choices that women make around health. I think that was when it sort of like started like occurring to me that it was something more than vanity.
Right, you were seeing this sort of guilt and blame and
Yeah,
shame.
yeah, and how like how seriously people take some of these choices. Like I remember just like how seriously different women I knew took. Like I was holding someone's baby once, and she said, "Have you ever held a baby that's formula fed?"
Oh my God.
And I was like, I don't know, I didn't have kids yet. And she was like, "It's disgusting."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow. You know, like, but people would just say stuff like that, you know, like unconsciously. And so I sort of started noticing more stuff like that.
Yeah.
By the way, my kids had like tons of formula.
Yeah.
So.
Mine too.
Yeah. They're not disgusting.
They can be. Yeah, and you also talk about this sort of illusion of control and
Yeah.
how important, you know, a driver that is as well. Maybe the flip side of it, which is, you know, the world is big and scary, and like I have this, you know, to your point, I have this child that I'm responsible for.
Yeah.
And so how can I exert as much control over what is an uncontrollable
Yeah,
situation?
totally. And I think that's just like what wellness is for a lot of people in general. It becomes like these little like micro things that you think you can control in a totally out of control world.
Right.
It's like you want to exert some form of control. And in some ways like it is, right? Like you can be healthier. So it's
Right.
not all pretend, right?
Yeah, like meditation seems like a pretty good thing.
Yeah, like nutrition is real.
Yeah, I'm a
totally real.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Like you can actually like take care of yourself,
Right.
and take care of your family, and be a healthier person.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
real.
yeah. How are we on? I'm gonna watch on. How are we on time? 5 minutes? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I happen to know that you started writing this book before the COVID epidemic hit.
Yeah.
How did that change
Oh my
the
God.
work?
Well, made it
If
a
it's
lot
not too
harder.
painful to do.
Yeah, it's pretty painful. So I think like I was a writer at New York Magazine, and I think a lot of what I did there can be kind of classified as, you know, social comedy, light social comedy. And I think when I first thought about this book, a lot of it was like in that, like I met all these like very ridiculous people, and they like talked in these very silly ways, and I was like, oh, you know, a lot of this book can be about that. So there was like the tone, I think, was one thing. I think then there was also just like a lot of reporting that I had done that was no longer relevant. Like I'd written about a lot of companies that were just like out of business immediately.
Oh, wow.
So I'd just done a ton of reporting that just was like totally irrelevant. Like I had just like hours of reporting on these like competing meditation studios that all thought they were gonna be the New York Sports Club of reporting. And they all shut by like June of 2020. Like they were all just out of business with no plans to reopen. So
Wow.
there was, so like just a lot of the book became irrelevant very fast. And then a lot felt very wrong tonally. And then there was just a lot that felt very different about the way we, like in a lot of ways I was like, oh my God, COVID is like the wellness rapture, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
all the people who like took wellness seriously are being delivered. And it actually is really serious to realize that we live in a culture that is treating health like a luxury product and a luxury good. And guess what? Like nobody rich is dying right now.
unless they're like, old or very sick, or that like the number, like once you started to see who was dying of COVID, it was like, this is in fact very serious. Like, this is actually a huge deal that we have sort of like complicitly gone along with this idea that like it's okay to have boutique and concierge doctors, and that like, but like the people who are getting sick and dying right now have in fact revealed enormous rift in the way we treat health, and we treat it like a luxury good, and that's actually a serious problem. And so I was like, this totally is a much bigger deal than I had understood.
Yeah, I mean, as you say in the book, the ultimate wellness hack is to have money.
Yeah, that's actually like that. Whatever else you're doing, when like someone was like, well, so what do you do you? Someone at one of these events was like, okay, yoga versus Pilates, and I was like, okay, well, like if you're making that decision, you're totally fine.
Right. Yeah.
Don't get run over by a bus. Like if that's your decision, that's it.
Yeah. All right, last question before we open it up. As I was reading this book, which by the way I haven't said yet, is terrific. It's a very quick, like fun read, but also very serious. And it's like I hear your voice in my head, which is always a lovely thing. So if you want Amy's voice in your head, which you should, I mean, you will enjoy it. But as I was reading it, I found myself seeing kind of wellness culture sort of everywhere. Like,
It is.
like if you go on LinkedIn,
Oh,
just like, oh, don't go on LinkedIn, but the language of, kind of your career journey, it has this sort of weird wellness overtone to it. I will also say, I know that this book is primarily about women's health, which makes sense. But my son is a junior in sophomore in high school, not a junior. And he and his friends, and I know this is a very common thing, is like completely gym obsessed.
Oh yeah, teenage boys love the gym now.
This is like a huge cultural thing about, and he takes photos of his food every day so that he can like send it to an app that'll tell him how much protein he's getting, and like it is a male flavor of wellness, but it strikes me as similar in that it is sort of empowering, but also sort of like
It's
punishing.
it actually like I think it's kind of worrying.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like one of the things is the book is about women, but I think that men are weirdly like catching up. Men of my generation are definitely not as into wellness. And like, the big, like when I was working on the book, and this was in the pre-COVID version, I got pitched like, oh, well, you need to come meet this young guy, and he's building the first ever men's wellness company. And it was Hims, and it was that prescription company. And that was their tagline. This is the first men's wellness company. That was what they were pitching. So I go and I meet with him, and their first product is Viagra.
Right.
Like a generic Viagra, and I was like, that's wellness? Like that's what men, like women are like, oh my God, I need to like, I'm filthy, I'm dirty, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that, like that's women's wellness. I'm hideous, and men are like, Viagra, like that's men's wellness. And I was like, and it was all like in baby language because they couldn't like confront it head on. It was like, and the line, like the copy was, ain't no one have time for bad sexy time. Really? Like women are supposed to be like amateur, like biologists.
That second time doesn't take very long.
I was like, we're supposed to be like chemists who understand like everything, like loathe ourselves, and like literally you've raised millions on ain't no one have time for bad sexy time to sell generic Viagra, which you've told me men will only do at like 3 a.m. in the privacy of their own homes. It's like log on to your thing. So I think generationally there's like so much less shame in like, younger men being like, I go to the gym, I take a picture of my food. So like on one level you're like, okay, is this progress, or would we have liked it to maybe be like,
Come the other way.
maybe like I don't know, like it's like complicated because it's like the younger guys are kind of joining like the girls and being like more neurotic about it rather than I don't know, it's complicated, because they definitely are, and I think it's being online and online dating and social media that's making younger men much more like, previous generations of women who are much more aware and self-conscious, rather than women becoming less self-conscious, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And they're more consumers, right? So like marketers are like, great,
Yeah, totally.
more people to sell stuff to.
Right. All right, let's open this up to the audience. Who has questions for Amy?
Hi. Early on in the conversation, you described this as a phenomenon for American women.
Yeah.
Does this not exist in other countries?
Someone else asked me that, and the short answer is I don't really know. I know about England, because I'm there a lot. And I'll say in the 20 years I've been spending a lot of time in England, they've become so much more like us.
Sure.
And I used to feel like they all thought I was berserk because I was like, I've got to go do my things, and now there's like pretty much no difference with the women in London and the women in New York. It's pretty much the same. I don't spend a lot of time in other countries, so I can't really, apart from England and the US. So it's hard for me to make a really educated answer to that. But I will say England now is basically the same, which it was not 20 years ago.
Does anyone else know?
Yeah, anyone?
Well, I mean, I know it's common in Europe, and particularly in Italy, for women to take the waters.
Yeah.
And it's all classes, so it's like open, there are like open facilities where you can go and sit in the water.
And I
section.
will
You can
say
also
though that
do
like
more high
with
end.
social media, the way that everything is kind of like collapsing.
Right.
That the kind of icons of fitness, the icons of, the routines, they're all that stuff is growing a lot more similar. It's like the way you used to be able to travel and be like, I can tell by your sneakers what country you're from, and now you can't.
So what is your litmus test for a product, for a supplement, or mushroom coffee, or this or that? I mean, some of them are marketing, but some of them have studies and proof and efficacy. So what is your personal
My
litmus?
personal litmus test, is it gonna make me like ill? And if it's gonna make me ill, I won't do it.
So you're not suspect of everything.
I don't take any supplements.
You don't.
No. Unless like I test low for something like at my normal doctor, like in the winter, if I have like a low vitamin D number or something, I'll take a vitamin D supplement. But other than that, I think it's very unusual to find a supplement that has like legitimate, peer-reviewed evidence. After working on this book for 5 years, like really strongly believe that nutrition is probably the best way, and that if you have access to a balanced diet, that is absolutely all you need. And then the rest of it, like, if you can afford it and it doesn't make you feel bad, like, do it. Yeah. It makes you happy? Sure. Yeah.
One over here first.
Hi, what got me to come here was the fact that I get so many texts, emails with, if you have this problem, you have that problem, you go on these long videos, and at the end, after a long time, they're all selling something. And I have fallen for many of them, and just listening to what you just said, aren't any of them legit? I mean, they're doctors and whatever, and I don't do enough research, but they're all selling something.
Yeah, I mean, there was this one time, like, I was reading this thing on Goop, and it was basically like, your shower is not really a shower, it's like a box that gives you cancer. It's like you go in there, and it's like, here, here, type your zip code, and I'm gonna tell you like how much cancer is in your water. And then it's like, what kind of shampoo did you buy your shampoo at the drugstore, like the tacky cheap drugstore, because then you definitely is just like a cancer bomb. And it's like the bottle that it's in, that's cancer, and like the shampoo, like that's cancer. You read it, you're like, oh my God, I just like go in there every morning to like get cancer. I thought I was like getting clean. And then at the end of it, it's like, here is some shampoo that comes in a glass bottle. And it's so nice, and it's just $200. And you can click right here and you can buy it. And here's like a filter that you can put in your shower head, and it's gonna like catch all the cancer, and it's like $500. And I was like, click, like I want the like shower, like, you know, so it's like pretty clear that like they all have something to sell. And like Dr. Oz, you know, like he had to go like before Congress because on one of his shows, he was like, oh, you just need this like green coffee supplement, and it's like amazing, and it's gonna do all this stuff for you. And here is my friend who's a doctor, and you're like, oh, it's Dr. Oz, like he was on Oprah, and he like, it's a professor at Columbia, and he's saying that this guy's a doctor, and the guy like wasn't a doctor, he was a marketing executive, and Dr. Oz was gonna like make all this money from this green coffee extract. So it can be really hard to know, and like it's very hard, and like, you know, one of the things about some of these like boutique and these concierge doctors, like, I don't know, I don't want to get an email from like my GP that's like, we're having a sale. Like, I don't want a doctor that's having a sale. Do you know what I mean? And you're like, I don't, like, am I gonna wait to get sick till my doctor's like having a sale? But like, you know, you get these emails, because I went and like got all these like workups from these different like fancy doctors when I was working on the book. And so I'm still on their things, and they'll be like, come in, we're having a sale. And it's like, I don't want to do that, but so I think it's generally like, try and just like pick your healthcare providers, like.
Well, my healthcare providers aren't like these people.
Yeah, so
email
like,
or whatever.
just go to them, I think.
Unsubscribe.
Yeah.
But like, still, I'll get those emails, and I'll be like, guys, come in. Look, I got the email like with the answer. It's here. Like, everybody come in, I have the answer. It's on my computer, you know. So like, yeah, I'm totally susceptible to it.
She's a question.
So I have been through all these, like I had a hospital birth, but it was with a midwife, not a midwife. So I've been through this whole thing this whole time. And I have Lyme and other autoimmune stuff, so I ended up at a doctor who did all this blood work for, $4,000. It wasn't covered by insurance. I had to like eat just string beans and then work my way back up to real food, and then went from there to like Huberman, so I've been through the whole thing. And at the end of 23 supplements a day, I'm embarrassed to say, like my liver had problems because I was taking all this stuff that was having all the adverse effects, including adaptogens, which I'm supposed to take one. Anyway, so now I'm like on the other side, and I keep swinging back and forth. Like I don't want to do things that are like, I didn't do the enemas, and I definitely didn't do coffee. But like, it's hard because Andrew Huberman, who's like a huge, where is he, at Stanford or something, all these credentials, is saying all this stuff, and it's like, well, he must know, he's at. So I think that's the hardest part. I don't have so much a question, it's just like, thank you for this, because I also taught at one of the meditation places in the city, and we were told to only wear white, only eat white foods. The owner was a Kundalini, blah, blah, whatever she was. And I think it's like terrifying as a woman, especially postmenopausal and all these things, like we are sold so much and everything we do is wrong, right? If I take too much, we're talking about the mushrooms, too many mushrooms is good, well that mushroom. And I just love hearing this because it resonates so strongly because I've been through all the little things. And I wonder if there's ever gonna be a way out.
Well, I got like a magazine assignment, I think it was like a year or two ago, and they were like, oh, there's this like amazing new diet book, would you like review it for us? And I was like, oh yeah. And it was actually this book that had come out in the 70s, and it was being reissued, and people were acting like it was this like revolutionary diet, and like paleo or keto or something, and it was called intuitive eating, and it was basically like the tagline was like, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, and it was like amazing, you know, and it was like, and I was like, first of all, it's so crazy that is like a diet, you know.
Yeah.
But it made me think that like what was so crazy about it was that like it was sort of what Jason and I were talking about in the beginning, which is that this idea of selling your body back to you, right? Like that there's so much time spent telling you that you have no idea, and so that you need to ask someone else, and then you need to like purchase this information as if you don't have any sort of like knowledge of yourself, and that you need to buy that knowledge from other people, is what the whole thing is kind of based on. So I was waiting for a friend at this cafe in Tribeca, and I was listening to these two women who were on that like 100 gram of protein a day diet, and one of them was like, oh yeah, I was like so behind at bedtime, and so she was like stuffing like chicken and like yogurt like in her mouth at like bedtime. She's like, oh, so I felt so sick, and then I like couldn't fall asleep because I was just like eating like chicken, and it was like so gross, right? Like who wants to like just stuff a bunch of chicken in their mouth before they go to bed? Like, but she like had to get her 100 grams of protein, but like it was so far from the idea of just eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, which just seemed like.
And well, how's that well?
Yeah, like because she had to get 100 grams, you know, like she had to get her 100 grams of protein, and she hadn't like reached it. But like, ugh, like you're going to bed with like a bunch of chicken, like it seems so gross. But it's like you've been told for so long that like you don't know, and that you have to like purchase these answers. Like the whole thing is based on this idea that like you have to buy the idea of someone telling you what to do, but you know. So yeah, exactly. Don't eat the chicken.
Did any of your research take you to the Oura ring, which seems to? Oh, okay.
I know. I gotta stop wearing it. Right? Like I'm done with the book.
Okay, because there was recently an article in the Times about not.
I gotta stop.
You gotta stop. Because that is the ultimate marker of neuroses. Like,
Yeah.
did I sleep? Like, you can't wake up and say, like, I slept
That's the
well.
first thing I do every day. I'm like, I'm fine. I'm like, I did it.
I mean, I just took it off, like 2 weeks ago. I was just like, I am not. Thank you. I feel very
We
good
can
about
make
it.
this a really special evening.
Oh my God. But it's like somebody told me that I had a good night's sleep, and I'm like, I didn't though. But I was comforted because this thing told me I had a good night's sleep.
I know.
And then it's just, then it's marking your stress. Huh?
I can't believe you bought that.
Also, I had this version, so I was wearing the beta version in 2020. I had the beta version, and it knew I had COVID in March 2020, which I didn't realize. But like, so I was like, it's amazing, and I think I still keep that in the back of my head because it was like. My readiness score was like lower than anything it had ever been, and I was like, wait, this is really weird.
Terrible.
And I was like fleeing the city, and I was like, my readiness score is very low. And then like a couple months later, they were like, oh, since you were wearing our beta testing thing, it turns out like go back and look at your scores like that March 10th or whatever. And I sent them in, and they were like, yeah, that's why your scores were so low. And I did. I had COVID like in that first alpha wave, and I was like, my Oura ring knew. And so I was like, oh, the Oura ring knows.
Okay.
But I gotta throw it. I'm done. The book is out. Like there's nothing I can add to that book.
So that's not part of this. I didn't know how new the Oura ring was in terms of when you.
Oh no, the Oura ring's in the book. It's in there. It's in there. I just am still. This
You're
is not
still
the
attached.
version anymore. This is like the I'm just still like checking my score all the time, like a fiend.
I encourage you to
Stop.
rate yourself.
I know. I gotta do it.
So I was wondering, in your research, did you come across, one, what were the most effective marketing strategies, and were there different strategies for people of different income brackets?
You should charge for this.
Yeah, I mean, what are those effective ones? Like, I mean, I think anything that targets like a new mother is just, you're gonna be like, yes, I will do it, because you're like so vulnerable. Yeah, I think new mothers are just sitting ducks, for sure. I think that, it's definitely like you watch it kind of trickle down in that, like, acai, for example, is something I found so interesting. Like,
and I guess like it's kind of the acai principle I find so interesting, and how that kind of, like anything that's kind of exotic can be sold for a lot more. So like my kids are obsessed with like acai bowls, and I'm like, it's just like I'd rather you go eat ice cream because at least you're having some like protein and calcium for your bones and stuff. They're like, oh, but it's acai, and you know, the thing about acai is like it's a berry and it's an antioxidant and everything, but it's so sour that it requires so much sugar to be palatable. But it's not like a more effective antioxidant than a strawberry or a blueberry or a raspberry that is already sweet. But because it's from the Amazon, you know, it's like, so when they eat the acai, they're actually just having like 4 Cokes or something, where there's like sugar, but they've been like sold this idea. So it's like, and it's the same thing with like all the different nut butters or all the different milk alternatives. Like milk is so nutritious, and if you aren't lactose intolerant, which most people aren't, like milk is a pretty perfect food. And a lot of the like milk alternatives are filled with like chemicals and stabilizers, and like if you can tolerate milk, it's like it's a really like perfect nutritional thing. But like people love to order their, so I think like those are really effective marketing tools on like a lower income level, is ordering like, you know, this barista blend like alternative milks. Like those are so bad for you. Just get milk. It's just much better for you. You know, don't get an acai bowl. Like, get an ice cream. You know, it's just better for you. You know?
Wellness expert Amy Larocca. Eat ice cream.
Yeah, it's like milk is pretty good for you. You know?
You sold me.
Yeah, it's like if you don't have a dairy intolerance, which most people don't.
Can you talk a little bit about the spirituality section? I hadn't really thought, or thought leaders, I hadn't really thought of like the Brene Browns and the Glennon Doyle in those sort of, in that wellness category, but it kind of falls, we've been talking about physical, but more the spiritual side I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, like which aspects, like the
Well, I
exercise parts,
guess I almost felt like, have I been suckered into something that I didn't even know, you know, because I'm all in on Brene Brown, and you know, I'm like, yeah, they're really empowering, and am I missing something? Am I just a sheep following?
If you're empowered, then
yeah,
great.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think forgive me, but your stance is not all of this stuff is terrible.
No, not at all.
Right. And,
totally not.
And I think you were seeing a lot of spirituality and spiritual traditions being kind of brought into the language of wellness a little bit, right?
Absolutely, and I think like, you know, since the end of World War II, in America, there's no one would disagree that like Americans' relationship to organized religion is just like plummeted. But I think that the yearnings have not changed, but the relationship to the institutions that answered that has totally changed. So these things have sprung up to respond to that. Some of them are exercise adjacent, like Soul Cycle or yoga, that have become really popular. And some of them are these kind of modern preachers, like Brene Brown or Glennon Doyle, who are kind of just universally accessible without the institution. And they answer for a secular population a lot of the spiritual longing, and I think that's why there's a kind of space for them and a position for them in the culture. So it's not hugely surprising, and it does fall into this kind of wellness space, because it's, you know, when you look at what the pillars of wellness are, spirituality is one of them, and it's something that's just totally fallen off in modern American life. So if you think that there's these kind of, you know, lay preachers who've become very popular, doesn't seem that surprising.
Yeah. And so far, they're not selling me anything, but maybe,
Books.
except their books.
Their
Their
books
books,
and
they're selling
podcasts,
a lot of
yeah,
books.
they sell a lot of books, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That is kind of the
It's
link of all
cheaper
this
than
is that
supplements.
It's cheaper.
there is this idea that, you know, we need extra coaching on how to be nutritious because we now live in this culture and society that is bombarding us, you know, and our lizard brain with, you know, junk that's hard to resist. And so we need to, you know, eat the right number of mushrooms or whatever to sort of counteract that. And similarly with spirituality, like we're being, you know, we have to correct the kind of sins of the culture around us through
Yeah.
these kind of like extra efforts and these very self-directed efforts.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anybody else have?
I
more?
thought of
Okay.
something else. In your research, did you find that the American food industry has really sabotaged us?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Is it different in England?
In England? Is it different in England? There's, well, again, much like in America, it's very class-based, you know, so if you live in the city and you, like, there's incredible produce in England, it's an island nation with incredible farming that rich people have access to, like, beautiful produce, and poor people have access to ultra-processed, like, nasty stuff.
Okay.
You know,
Like us.
so like everything is class-based, yeah.
All right, I think
We're gonna wrap, and, thank you so much, Jason, thank you so much, Amy, that was really amazing.